So I think it was a combination of opening up so widely, listening in to what was wanted from me by life itself, looking at the state of the planet, seeing and understanding climate change and wildlife decline and over consumerism and all the damage that's being done. And I started to hear this phrase over and over for about 3 months. Every time I would walk on the moor, I would hear Dartmoor's granddaughter, Dartmoor's granddaughter. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it was. I don't know who was speaking, if anyone, if anything. But I started to recognize that there was a calling. And so after several months, actually, it felt more painful to not do the thing that I was being asked to do and to step over that edge, step over that fear, and just to do it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Success here at Redefining Success with Emma and Iona. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Iona.
Welcome, Emma. This is a space where we have conversations with business leaders to understand how we can create a more soulful path to success. So today we have the pleasure of interviewing Emma Cunis from Dartmoor's Daughter. Emma conducts walks and nature connection experiences on the lovely Dartmoor National Park here in Devon. And this includes things like navigation, archaeology, mycology, myths and legends, farming, so many things. And her company has also won the Traveller's Choice Award every year since 2021. So Emma is passionate about sharing the beauty and the history of Dartmoor and supporting people to connect to nature. She has a background in health and life coaching, outdoor education, and bushcraft, among many other things. So welcome, Emma, to our show today.
Welcome.
We're really pleased to have you.
Much. Thank you. Delighted to be invited.
Great. So Emma, you have obviously crafted a business from something that's connected to what means something to you, from what you love. And this is why we are really interested to talk to you, because we feel we need more of that in the world, people connecting to creating a business and a way of living from what means something to them. But you haven't always been in this position. You spent over 20 years in the corporate sector and you founded Dartmoor Daughter in 2015. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your transition into this work and your journey so far.
Yes, gosh, that's quite a big question. Inside that corporate world, I was still finding ways to do things that I really loved and enjoyed, but it was very high stress and living in different countries around the world and being on a plane a lot eventually ended up in me becoming very ill with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. And that was really the kind of pivotal point. Sometimes it happens where we have a crisis, a health crisis, relationship, job, work, all sorts of different things, where we are invited, I think, to wake up and think about what's most important to us in our lives and in our communities and in our natural world. And I spent quite a number of years trying to recover my health from in a holistic way, food and nutrition, counseling, spiritual connection, lots of different things. And eventually I realized after about 6 years of still being in the corporate world, I needed to just leave that world and leave the stress of it and try to find a different way of being. So initially I just left with no plan really of what I was going to do. I just knew that I needed to be back closer to nature, back home in Devon where I grew up and I love it, and find a path through to healing. And so that was really the first step towards creating this. I started to, as part of my recovery, I was starting to walk again up on Dartmoor that I love and I grew up walking and have a deep passion and enthusiasm for. And not just the land itself, but people's stories, the folklore, the myth and magic, the flora, fauna, the rivers, all of it. And my grandmother was still alive at the time, and I started talking to her about the stories of when my grandfather had set up a walking and pony trekking guide here, business here in the 50s. And I started to think maybe I could do something similar and use it as a way to help myself, but also help others into a deeper sense of connection with our bodies, for health and well-being, with our communities and with the land. And after it was about a year later of coming back home, where I started to think, okay, I really want to do this. This feels really meaningful to me, really important. And I started to invite family and friends to come along with me and tell them things along the way of our walks, and said, might you come with me if I set this up as a little going concern? And at the time, I had no idea about how to make money out of it or how to live. I wasn't trying to do anything based on profit at all, actually. It was just doing something that felt really important and meaningful, not just to me, but to the state of the world at the moment as well, and people's health and well-being. So I got lots of feedback and started by donation, and then I went and got qualified and started charging money as well. It's a very tough earning a living, but it feels meaningful and important work today. So there's lots more pieces I could tell you inside of all of that, but I'll stop for now and see if you've got any questions or reflections on that.
Yeah, I have. You mentioned your grandmother and your ancestry and growing up in Devon. Does it feel like you're picking up your ancestral threads? And if so, what's that like, running a business with your lineage, your ancestral lineage really behind you and holding you?
That's a wonderful question. It does. And actually, I had set this up before my grandmother died. And so I feel a bit emotional, but she said, oh, I think your grandfather would be really proud of you. This was both of their first marriages. So there was a second family afterwards. So I didn't know him very well at all. But to hear that from my granny was really moving. And he was very celebrated as a Dartmoor author as well as guide. He published quite a lot of books about Dartmoor. So on the one hand, there's a real excitement and enthusiasm, not just from who he was, but my maternal lineage, actually, with my mum and my granny. And it was the female side of the family, actually, that really have always loved Dartmoor and lived here or visited here a lot. But it also comes with a bit of pressure, because I sometimes feel like I have to live up to something. But one of the things my granny said was, in his books, he never mentioned her. And yet it was my grandmother that introduced him to Dartmoor. And so something in me in that moment went, I think I want to offer another feminine voice way of inviting people for walks, because so many of the guides back then, the lecturers, the authors were male. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think there's so many incredible women up here doing amazing work. And I wanted to be another version of that, I suppose. But yes, every time I'm walking on the moor, I also feel like I'm walking in the footsteps of the ancestors, the Dartmoor ancestors from thousands of years ago, and also walking in the footsteps of my literal ancestors, which is really touching to think this person was here, decades ago or a few generations ago. And we've got family albums which go back to the late 1800s with photographs dotted around Dartmoor, which is just a treasure trove.
That's so beautiful to hear you. I can really feel that history of all your ancestors and the history of Dartmoor all behind you. But somehow there's something in you that has answered the call to be at that point of that trajectory of where we're at now and continuing that lineage. And so I'd love to hear more about that piece, that call that I imagine you felt. You said you came back to Dartmoor and you didn't know what was going to unfold, and you just were doing what you loved and what moved you, and it somehow led you into your calling. And I know Emma and I have started like this as well. We don't know, let's just follow what we love and really listen to life. So I'd love to hear more on that.
There's quite an esoteric piece to it as well, so that may or may not resonate. So when I became really unwell with ME, chronic fatigue, I had a whole host of different symptoms, from exhaustion to body pain. My cognitive abilities were really impaired, and I'd always prided myself on being quite analytical and logical and rational, and I was very driven, very much in my masculine energy in that world, and was quite successful because of that. So when my cognitive abilities were very impaired, I couldn't take in information very easily, and I couldn't make sense of complex things and make decisions easily. So it was extremely challenging. And I really feel now, reflecting back on it, that I was forced into more of a state of flow, without your mental capacities being so clear. I was forced into a place of feeling. And I realized I'd been very shut down for probably years, actually, as a way of just coping in that kind of corporate environment and being successful. It was the way to get through, to be very protected, a bit shut down, and just to use that very action-oriented, goal-oriented energy. Again, not a bad thing, but that was over dominant for me, and the felt sense was probably not very present at all. And so coming back to Devon, being surrounded by beautiful seasonal patterns and trees and plants and flowers and birds and the moon cycle, which I'd lost connection with, looking at this night sky and the stars, I started to feel more emotion in myself. Lots of waves of different things came up, grief and fear and anger and all sorts, that probably had been there for years but not been allowed to be expressed. And as I walked on the moor in particular, that sense of spaciousness, and for me, gentleness and nurturing. I know the moor can also be very fierce and elemental, and some people really fear that. But for me, there was a sense of spaciousness. There was no demands on my attention or time or who I am. I could literally just be as I needed to be. So I felt really opened up in a way that I probably hadn't experienced as I was a child. And your word, Iona, you heard a call, I think you said, is actually what happened. So I think it was a combination of opening up so widely, listening in to what was wanted from me by life itself, looking at the state of the planet, seeing and understanding climate change and wildlife decline and over consumerism and all the damage that's being done. And I started to hear this phrase over and over for about 3 months. Every time I would walk on the moor, I would hear Dartmoor's granddaughter, Dartmoor's granddaughter. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it was. I don't know who was speaking, if anyone, if anything. But I started to recognize that there was a calling, and that I was honoring the ancestors, perhaps in the granddaughter piece in some way. And that I was a child of the land, not as a human trying to be over dominant, but I was a daughter of. So I believe we're all sons and daughters of the land, I suppose is the best way to put it. And anytime I would go to places like stone circles or a particular ancient oak tree, or a spring or the head of a river, I would hear another phrase, which is bring people here. Bring people here. Didn't know what it meant. Who am I to bring people anywhere? I've got no qualifications, no experience. So questioning it all, dismissing it, thinking it's nonsense. And I would ask questions back saying, well, how do I bring people here? What do I do when I do bring people here, if I bring people? No answers, just bring people. I feel quite emotional again. And so after several months, actually, it felt more painful to not do the thing that I was being asked to do, and to step over that edge, step over that fear, and just to do it, just to invite friends and family first to come with me and to see how that flowed and to go from that point. So I'm aware for some people that would sound really esoteric. And for me, back in the corporate world, I would have thought that person was nuts. But it was a deeply moving experience, physical experience by moving through the landscape, noticing all the tiny details around me. It was an emotional experience, and also connecting with the places that I loved as a child. I would say a spiritual experience, opening up to being one tiny cell in this extraordinary living, working planet that we live on.
Wow. I feel so deeply moved by what you've said, Emma. So yeah, because I wonder if lots of people hear those whispers but never actually act on them or respond to them. And to hear you speaking about how you've done that, and now what you've, knowing what you've created through that process is deeply, deeply moving. And so from that, I'm wondering, do you ever experience, when you take people on the moor, have you witnessed people having profound experiences and opening up in maybe ways that maybe they expect to simply go on a walk, but something else moves within them or is shifted? Because just from hearing you talk, I feel deeply moved. So yeah, I'm wondering if you've witnessed people, or do they feed back that these experiences similar? Maybe not, I don't know, maybe not as profound, but yeah, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, thank you. I feel moved that you feel moved. I'm trying hard not to cry in this
Yeah,
moment.
I feel the same. Yeah.
Um,
We can cry here, I think.
yeah,
That's what just do
great.
it.
I feel like the land is and nature and the ancestors are longing for us to be back in connection with them because it's all around us. We are it. So to forget that seems bizarre somehow. But yes, I have, and I offer a whole different range of experiences. So if I sense that people are coming along and they just want a walk or a hike, I might offer little pieces, perhaps entering into a stone circle in silence and imagining how it was built or who built it or why it's in this location or the purpose of it. I might offer little pieces along the way, but I won't be edging towards the more esoteric. Other walks I do are immersive nature connection experiences where I'll offer a meditation, for example, at the beginning of a walk, using all our bodily senses and noticing what we can smell, feel, see. We might sit by a river for a period of time in silence, and I might offer a question or some pens and a sketchbook. I did a walk called Stories from the Stones, where we walked to different Bronze Age settlement hut circles, and I invited people to sit inside hut circles and to write as if the people were speaking to them from those places. And there was poems and work, it was and songs. And yes, I have witnessed quite a number of people who've either had tears themselves at the beginning, perhaps after the meditation or at the end of the walk, because it's been slow and immersive and with stops along the way, or people who've mentioned it to me afterwards. There was a gentleman who came on it was a mindfulness walk, I think, a few years ago. And he didn't say it to me at the time, but on the next walk he came on, he said that moment when we sat by the river, I think it was for half an hour, 40 minutes or something. And I'd invited them to ponder on a particular question. Perhaps they wanted to bring what they wanted to bring into their lives. He told me afterwards that that was the moment he decided that he wanted to leave where his family were living, and to move the family down to Devon. And they'd been pondering on it for years of what to do and where to go. And that really moved me. And I remember a wonderful woman coming along who, just at the end of this brief meditation at the beginning of the walk, it was only 2 or 3 minutes, I think. And she said, I haven't stopped for months. This is the first time where I've had a little bit of a space and to think about me. It's always been about others, and she was so grateful. And then we had a whole lovely walk in front of us as well, where she got to experience even more of that. And as a young woman, I used to be very, yes, again, I had a lot of energy and directive energy. So I played lots of competitive sports. I would do route marches across Dartmoor. How far and how fast can I go? But becoming ill really forced me to rethink how I live my life. And it's still challenging today. I have to do something and then rest in between. But offering that back to people as an alternative, another way to experience life, their bodies, their connection with what's outside of themselves is just exquisite. And some of the reviews that people have written on TripAdvisor or Google have been really moving. Things that they didn't say to me on the day, perhaps, but they've realized afterwards, which is beautiful, very, very touching. And that's underneath what I do. Underneath everything, let's go for a nice walk, actually is my hope for a more meaningful, deeper experience, where you can come into more of a sense of balance with your lives and with others, and care about the landscapes we're in.
So beautiful, Emma. Hearing you speak, it just helps me connect to why I'm doing what I'm doing now with Emma, which is really wanting to, for ourselves and for others, to connect to listening to that voice. You know, what is it that we are each being called to do? Because you've obviously followed that, and you bringing through your gifts that are completely aligned to listening to that voice. But as you say, it's so much deeper than just offering walks. And I think this is what we're missing out on so much, is that deeper connection to slowing down, listening to ourselves, listening to nature, connection with others. And it really seems to contrast with the corporate world, which is very masculine, which is just about going ahead, getting, achieving. And often people experience burnout and ill health, or their relationships suffer, their health suffers, and there is this fallout. And it feels to me like there's this bigger calling from life that's inviting us, whether through crisis or however we come to it, to come back into that connection. And when we do, you know, we can see from your example how much gifts become available, not only for you, but for everyone who you touch. And I'd love to hear your view on success and how it compares in the corporate world, where you obviously seem successful, traveling the world and doing what you were doing, to your view of success now.
Well, that's such a good question. And I just want to touch briefly on what you said about the different ways of being in different worlds. And I think in different stages of our lives, perhaps we need different things. As a younger woman with lots of energy, I thrived in that kind of environment and enjoyed some more of the challenging approaches. I could have done with more of the softness and the flow. But certainly at different stages of our lives, and perhaps different people require different levels of that balance. So I think there's room for lots of different styles, for example, of walks, and not everyone will respond to mine, and not everyone will respond to other people's. So having a range of options and knowing what we need, I think, is so helpful. You know, I haven't thought about what success looks like, because I think in my corporate world, I think I would have defined myself by the external respect, validation, promotions, financial reward. And it's a very hierarchical approach, not only in the systems that you're in, but also you're encouraged to literally climb the career ladder. That's what it's called. And so I think I had a series of expectations that probably weren't mine to begin with, but that I took on. And I don't see any of that really in my world now. I've worked quite hard on trying to feel a sense of self-worth without needing external validation. So I think that's important. Success for me would be feeling like a valued human being on the planet, where I have friends and family and health and well-being, and I'm caring for everything around me. If I have some kind of positive impact on other people's lives, physical health, mental well-being, that really matters to me. So I would see that as some kind of form of success. I don't always get to hear about it, but it's lovely when I do. Knowing that somebody has come on a walk and had their eyes opened to, or hearts opened to, a different way of seeing, understanding, learning about Dartmoor and the natural world and our cultural heritage, myths and legends, and then doing something about it. So they might go and volunteer somewhere. They might donate some money to a particular charity or cause that's doing good work. They're doing more in their own lives to be gentler on the planet. That I would define as success. Again, I don't always get to hear about it, but that feels really important to me and probably the key reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And
So
actually,
beautiful.
it's not successful. I would say I'm just about getting through. Um, Certainly pre-COVID, I was just about getting through, and it was okay. You know, I had a fairly stable, self-employment is always challenging, but I had a fairly stable base, and then that just absolutely kicked everything out of the window, and it's been really challenging since then. So I am able to still just do this job, walks, talks, tours. I've just written my first little book, which is exciting. And I could choose, for example, in the winter months to go and get another job. And I have considered that for several years, over and over. But I know my health would be compromised, and then I wouldn't have the energy to do what I really care about. I think my mental health would be compromised as well. And I'm going through perimenopause. So that feels really important that I take care of myself
Yeah.
during these years. And if I've got just enough to get through, then I just pare back my lifestyle to do something that feels important. I'd rather do that, I think, at the moment still, than going to do a job that just doesn't fit with my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not easy. You know, I want to be very honest about that. It's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's answering a call, but then there's an element of trust in that, that trusting that life will hold you, and that it's very different to being able to rely on a monthly salary. Yeah, obviously. So I'm thinking about the structures that you put in place, because you mentioned about COVID. Obviously, I know it affected pretty much everybody on the planet. So in terms of the structures that you put in place for your work, have they carried you through? I'm thinking about things like social media, websites, when you couldn't have the actual, you weren't able to take people out, I'm assuming, because no one could go out anywhere.
Mm.
So what were the structures that you had in place that have carried you through, and how important and beneficial are they? And it may be other things, may not just be the tech stuff, but yeah, how essential are they to keeping like the foundations of the business going?
That's a really good question. You've got to look at the practicalities, haven't you, as well?
That
I,
masculine energy coming in, but in
yeah,
a different
it's
way,
trying to
you know?
balance the two.
Yeah,
I will confess that I went into quite a lot of fear. You know, it's extremely challenging,
yeah,
and the cost of living crisis as well. It's continued to be.
yeah.
But yes, it's a good question. I hadn't reflected on that before. So I think some of my skills from my corporate world and also who I am as a person
Mm,
really helped carry me through. So the first way that I started to um, publicize or promote my walks initially was through emails, word of mouth, and Facebook. And
mm.
my Facebook following is something like nearly, I think it's 18,000 or something,
Wow.
which is huge, you know, but not many people use Facebook these days. So I've also got Instagram, Facebook threads. Haven't made it onto TikTok yet. Probably should do. Um, so communicating through social media did certainly carry me through. And my background was corporate account management and business development. So I think I'm quite good at thinking about ways to engage people to want to come to something. And what I ended up doing was doing online talks, which were very successful. Um, didn't make up for the shortfall in the walks, but I remember having 60 people on one of my first online talks. So that was a whole new era I hadn't gone into before. And I had support from at the time two different women. So Claire, who helps me with uh, admin, and she helped me with some of the technical stuff, setting up online talks, because my brain doesn't compute this stuff. I've really struggled with it. She helped me set up Zoom. You know, I had no idea how to do it. And I feel it feels really important to me to support other women, particularly if they have a family at home and need part-time roles, because I never really saw that support in the workplaces I was in. And also Tara, who has built my website, she's been amazing as well. So I would say they're people, but I would consider that a structure. There was other people there that I could discuss ideas with and how to implement them. I would have been very stuck by myself, I think. We could only take 6 people out at a time. I think it was in the second lockdown. I can't quite remember now. So even though it didn't generate money really to cover more than just costs, it still felt meaningful and important to me to offer spaces where people could come out into nature, have a kind of more soothing experience. COVID was very stressful for lots of people. And to share how that was. So we did all the proper protocols. So I had an online booking system, and that made it easy for people to book, and I felt secure that they were going to hopefully turn up if they'd booked. Not everyone does, of course. I don't really know what other structures I had in place other than thinking, oh yeah, this is a good time for me to write a book. 6 years later, I still haven't written that particular book, but I have written another one. So it started me thinking more creatively, I think, about how to diversify income and to have that more masculine structures in place that I just want to go with the flow. And if I had my way, I wouldn't charge anyone for anything. I just feel it's so important that we can offer access to green spaces in a safe, lovely way for people. But it's hard to get funding, and I haven't got the brain capacity to understand how to fill in forms and look to be a CIC or a charity, which is probably what I would try to do if I could. I hope that goes some way towards answering.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. That's really amazing and inspiring, because it feels like it's grown organically, which I feel is the soul path and the heart way and the life calling way, that there is this a rootedness and then this organic growth. Iona and I have just planted recently a little oak sapling, and from seeding our company through the process of planting it, we realized we're now the saplings. So
Oh,
yeah, we're which felt really, really beautiful. That feels like a true kind of marriage of the masculine energy and the feminine working beautifully together.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that analogy of an oak sapling. And as you've been talking, I realized the other thing I did actually was I spent quite a lot of time, obviously by myself, walking, exploring, looking at new routes, learning about new things. I did a little online course on bryophytes, mosses and lichens and ferns. I read books. So I also, it's not necessarily a structure, but I was looking at ways
Yeah.
to build my knowledge set so that I could then take that out. And I wrote articles for like newspaper like the Moorlander and Dartmoor magazine, for example, if they invited me. So those are little structures, I suppose, building relationships through those times with anyone who has some kind of interest in Dartmoor, whether it's a landowner, a farmer, an ecologist, a meadow owner, an author, and just looking to ways to build that in the future, because it still felt important to me to do that rather than go and do a different job where I could probably earn more money, and yeah, my heart wouldn't be in it.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm hearing so much creativity and in how you are with your process and really trusting that it's right for you and being with it and allowing those ideas to come. I'm curious, how do you support that creative process and new ideas, new things coming in your business?
Another great question, and something I should probably create more space for. Creative ideas seem to come to me when I create spaciousness. So that's usually when I'm walking, sitting in a woodland, swimming in a river, lying down in the middle of a stone circle, and these ideas flood in. not necessarily my own. I feel like it's a co-creation of life itself and my openness. Because being out on the moor for me, it brings me into the present moment. And I might go out and start feeling upset or angry or, I don't know, some kind of worry. But very quickly you're brought into the present moment. You have to look at the terrain, you have to watch the weather systems that are coming into you. You have to follow a particular route. So being in the present moment, being open, I know invites creativity. What I don't do very well is sit in my home, in my little office or in the garden or anywhere, and actually create that space, deliberately create it intentionally. I've tried, but there's always a to-do list when I'm at home. So unless I create the space by going outside, then I find that hard. Having said that, over the winter, when I wanted to meet a particular deadline of writing this little book, it's Dartmoor Myths and Legends, Exploring Origins and Inspirations. Once I got myself into a little routine and the weather wasn't so conducive, I didn't have lots of bookings, and I knew if I got a little book out in time for this season that potentially people might buy it, which they have, which is lovely. So I did deliberately create the space and I loved it. The flow, the writing flow, and reading all the different background books that I wanted to explore. Going out and taking photographs, driving around Dartmoor with my aunt, who's painted original watercolors and pen and inks. And so what I'm basically saying in a long form is that I need to create more space because that's when creativity flows. And I'm still, in a way, I think, learning how to do that. I'm not very good at learning how to rest or just be. And for me, being out in nature is the space where it happens the most. It's a long way out of answering your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely on the mark, because I do feel it's this blend of the masculine and the feminine, the structure and the space to allow to listen to life that brings in those original creative ideas. And I'm sure current business models could benefit greatly from just pausing and tuning into that more for out of the box ideas and thinking. So yeah, it is something that we believe in, and it's lovely to hear you confirm that for us, that is so important in a business, is making that space to really allow that unfolding and that slow nurturing. And I love that you enjoyed your process of writing your book, and
I was quite surprised.
yeah, I love that. It's wonderful.
There's a lot more people now offering more immersive nature connection type experiences and activities. And in the past, I've had people literally copy a walk that I've done or a talk, and they've lifted copy from my website or from a Facebook event page, for example, and put it in their own. And my first response, probably the response I would have had in my corporate world as well, is, what on earth are you doing? There isn't enough of a pie even for me and the other people that are here now. So it comes from fear. The initial response is fear and competition. And then what I realized, oh, how wonderful. There's more people wanting to invite others with their own, hopefully they'll create their own styles, to experience the natural world and find understanding and connection. And what it does is it pushes me to then think, well, okay, what's the next evolution of what I want to offer, actually? And it's not to offer the same things over and over and over. There are a few walks that I do each year. For example, there's a midsummer walk that I do for the solstice, navigation training because it's skills, that feels really important, wild swimming, etc. But evolving feels so crucial to any organization. And sometimes it needs a difficulty in order to do that, or a perceived difficulty or perceived competition. So I wanted to mention that because I feel like in terms of business and success, that's you have to keep evolving for people to find you and want to come with you. And it's very lovely. I get people coming back on different walks that I've done over the years, or coming back on the same ones, or joining me on talks if they've joined me for a walk. So that also feels like a really important component. And I think the key is, as Emma said earlier, is that you keep connecting over and over to your own, who are you as a being? What do you love? What's your joy? What gives you, what gives you joy? And then looking at what the world needs, what the market wants, who are your target audiences, and trying to find that marriage, that union that's so special. Because what comes through you will be a slightly different offering than when it comes through someone else, even if you're in the same industry. And I think it's important that we all try to support each other and find ways to collaborate actually as much as we can as well. Where I haven't got knowledge in a particular area, I'll try and collaborate with an expert when I can.
That's where we're coming from as well. Collaboration is the new way forward, not to be in fear, not to feel everything's a competition, that there's no space for everybody, that there's no, like you talked about, pieces of the pie. Actually, everything is infinite, everything is abundant. There's actually more than enough for everyone. And so how do we expand, evolve, and make room and support ourselves and others, regardless of what we're doing, and even if there's overlaps? And yeah, it's really important. You mentioned about the perimenopause impacting your work in different ways. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Yes, a few years ago, I had retrained as a macrobiotic health and life coach, and I'd started to learn a lot more about my own cycles and body, and started to recognize that I didn't feel exactly the same every single day, and that in fact I had lots of energy when I was ovulating, for example, and not so much when I was bleeding. And so I started to try, where possible, reorienting my work based around my cycle. So if I had to write something particularly dynamic, or I was approaching a new organization with an idea where I needed clear thinking and a sort of forward-directed energy, or I had to be in front of people giving a talk, or I had a longer walk come up, then I would do that in those times when I was ovulating. And then when I was bleeding, I tried to allow more space and rest during that week. And similar with perimenopause, it's really knocked me for six in a way that I didn't anticipate at all. I think our generation didn't really talk or know much about perimenopause, so I was already in it before I realized what was happening. And it's really knocked my health for six as well. The ME has come back a bit more strongly than it had for the previous years. And so I've had to think really carefully again about how I organize my work and life. So allowing more space for rest, leading more gentle walks, or if I lead a walk, then it's shorter, easier terrain, more rest stops along the way, perhaps noticing more of the details, more mindfulness, looking at little flowers rather than, route marching on. That's all been so important. And the creative flow wasn't really there for several years. I was quite shocked in a way that I couldn't feel as deeply and get these new and creative ideas that I had had for several years before. It's starting to flow again now, but it's taken its time. So knowing more about our bodies, which feels so obvious, and yet I didn't grow up to think that way. Knowing more about our bodies, knowing more about our cycles, how we fluctuate, and trying to, where possible, it's not always possible, of course, with the demands on our time, but where possible, trying to adjust your schedules or your work to fit around your cycles. I've discovered I'm much more productive. If I'm trying to force work to happen when I'm feeling really low, exhausted, and depleted, it'll take me hours to do something that in a week's time will take me half an hour. So I'm actually much more productive by following my own cycles. And that's been a little bit of wisdom that I've learned and would love to impart to others as well.
Thank you, Emma. I was wondering about that because Dartmoor can be quite relentless in the winters and with the rain and the shine. You don't really know what you're going to get. And you seem really consistent in taking people out on walks, come rain or shine, And I know that consistency does seem important in a business and generating success. And I wondered how you manage that, being a woman in perimenopause, where often we don't know what we're going to feel from one day to the next.
Yeah, that's really true. There's definitely less work available in the winter anyway, and for a few years I would try to organize walks, and people would either book and then cancel because it was awful weather. Um, or for example, people said we want wild swimming. We want to go cold water swimming. I was like, great, okay, organized a water, got one booking. So rather than trying to push against what was the flow just externally as well as my own body, I realized I need rest. There's not enough work in the winter actually to make it worthwhile putting in all that energy to try and push something uphill. So I'm going to take a month or two to rest over the winter. And whilst that's worrying from a financial perspective, I am again then much more productive in the spring. When my body has had that amount of rest, a month or two, creativity in the winter is absolutely a joy because you've got the time and space. And I think yeah, consistency is important. But I offer an online talk, for example, in the winter. I'll go and do talks to history groups or women's institutes or roundtables. So there's a way of being consistent, but it doesn't necessarily look the same on the surface, but you are still engaging in a way. I might write a nice blog and put that out. So social media has something as well to keep ticking along. Yeah, just continually listening in to what feels important and following the threads is the
So
key.
it's about showing up. So always show in, and that may take different shapes and forms. But
Including for yourself. If
yeah,
I had to
showing
show
up
up
for
for
yourself
myself,
is
give
probably
myself rest because I hadn't done
yeah.
that before.
So
Yeah.
showing up for yourself that's the first and foremost vital thing to do. Because when we show up for ourselves, we can then show up for each other and for the communities we're serving.
Mm.
Yeah. Can you say something? Because you've mentioned your book a few times, which we're definitely here to plug as well. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to, it wasn't
no,
deliberate.
good. We're
I'm just quite
glad. Yeah.
excited. I literally
Yeah.
picked it
It's
up
super
10 days ago.
exciting. So can you tell us a bit more about myths and legends, the importance of them in terms of your book and how they also how they impact people and why they're important for us all?
Yes. I would start off by saying that I grew up with stories. So the tradition of oral storytelling is really important in places like Dartmoor, and other, rural communities around, of course, and Indigenous communities. If you look around the world, stories are how we learn. It's knowledge, it's information, it's transmitting the dangerous places to go where you find food, water holes, where the ancestors are buried, etc. They're all contained in the myths and legends. So I grew up with stories. Our mother in particular used to read and tell us stories. For me, walking to the places where these myths and legends take place offers another dimension, I think, to just here's a granite tour and here's the geomorphology of it, how it was formed. I can also understand this rock as a being, perhaps with a name, perhaps with a story, perhaps it was a person or an animal turned to stone. And I love that because I do feel like everything is a living, breathing, not necessarily breathing, but a living being with consciousness. And if we went around the world treating everyone and everything like that, we'd probably be a lot more kind about how we operated in the world. It also deepens my understanding of a place. So knowing, for example, that a story might incorporate a potential sacred site. It's not just a burial chamber, but this is where this happened, and this person was here, and this is the story of it. It deepens my understanding of that place. And for me, that then brings a deeper sense of belonging. And I think that the world greatly needs these days. We're a lot more transitory. We've moved to different countries and different locations, and feeling a sense of belonging in our communities and on our landscapes feels really important. And then we might care about those places more as well if we feel like we belong. And I think there's something about archetypes is the other piece I would say. So many people, of course, these days wouldn't believe myths and legends, don't believe in the pixies, sadly. If you talk to some of the older people on Dartmoor, the farming families as well, even only a generation or so ago, people were still leaving little gifts out for the pixies and offering gratitude because you were afraid of something going wrong. And looking at those stories not as silly, nonsensical childhood fun, but looking at them in terms of how they could mean something in today's world, and potentially the different archetypes that are in them, and how they transmit and transmute through different cultures as well. So some, for example, I think the Hound of the Baskervilles, this big dark hound with fiery eyes, racing across Dartmoor with old Crochan or the devil. There's similar myths in Northern Europe with the wild hunt, and looking at how those patterns flow through our DNA and our human nature and our landscapes, I think is really intriguing. And it for me brings a question of what it is to be human. And stories are so much part of what makes us up and how we learn and connect and deepen our relationship with others and landscapes.
Wow. The space right now is so full of this
I know.
rich tapestry of what it is to be human. I think you're really bringing that to the fore, that we're not just these machines that are here to, you know, create wealth and care about ourselves only, but we are informed by our ancestors, our DNA, our connection to life and stones and stories, and who are we when we really deeply swimming in that soup of life. It's wonderful to hear you, Emma, and so grateful for your gifts. And I'm wondering, how can people get hold of your book? How can they connect with you if they want to do that?
That's so kind. Thank you. I have a website, Dartmoor's Daughter. So there's a few different offerings on there if anyone's interested. There's public walks, for example, nature connection experiences, where you just can buy a ticket and come along. There's about one a month at the moment. I'm also offering online talks and live talks. There's a whole different array of subjects, again, on the website. And yes, the book is also on the website. I just picked up the printed copies about 10 days ago. So that's really exciting. And I've been sending them out and writing little notes to people in them. So that feels, yeah, it's exciting. And it's not just the myths and legends of Dartmoor, which is, you know, a lovely way of storytelling. Because I'm a guide and my first degree was in history, I've woven in all the different pieces of Dartmoor: archaeology, geology, flora, fauna, the right to roam movement. You know, lots of different themes are incorporated into those stories as well. Or of course, I can do private groups, private walk just for an individual, if people would like that as well. So yes, come and find me, get in touch, come and explore the more with me, and I'll reveal both the places that people know and love and some of the more hidden treasures.
Wow, that's so exciting. I feel like my heart and my whole soul has expanded immensely with talking to you, Emma. I feel so full of the rich tapestry, as Iona said. I really do. And so deeply moved by everything that you bring and how you weave it all. Like, so visiting a stone circle is not just visiting a stone circle. There's a whole wealth of what went before and who we are in that. What's our piece in the jigsaw in all of that, how we fit. And we can only fit as like one cell, as part of the whole infinite being of all that is. We're not separate from that. And if that, I feel that you've really, touched me deeply with that in what you're bringing and all your wisdom and your offerings. So on a last note, what would you say to people that are perhaps considering stepping out to take action on that call of life, but maybe don't know how to do it, or a bit wobbly about it, or a bit scared? What would what would maybe some advice or thoughts be about that for those out there listening that are considering something like that?
I think the key for me would be to, I know it's a trite phrase, but follow your joy. What ignites your passion, your enthusiasm? What do you most want to do, share, be? Who do you want to be? What's the legacy you want to leave behind in this world for the people, the children coming in front of us as well? What's meaningful to you? What does the world most need? Following your joy feels really important. But I would also couple that with, if you've got the skills to ground that in practical reality and make that into a business, great, do it. You've got the combo of the two. If you don't have that and you're more in the creative flow, then see if you can bring in some kind of partnership that's going to support you. It could be a paid partnership, it could be funding, it could be a business coach, it could be a friend, somebody that's going to help support to ground that into this earthly realm as well.
Mm.
And it's not always possible inside one person, or you might not want to engage in the practical realities. I don't particularly want to do any of my own admin. I don't want to do the website. I have no interest. I don't enjoy it. I don't like emails. I used to love all that stuff, funnily enough, in the corporate world. But yeah, now I have a couple of people who help me, very part-time to do the pieces that I am not so good at anymore. So I'm freer to listen to the calling, to be creative, to do the invitations and invite people into doing the work that I deeply love and care about. And in that way, I think it flows more easily and hopefully abundantly for those of people listening to this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Such a rich advice there. Thank you, Emma. I'll definitely be getting one of your copies of your books, and we'll be leaving the link below where other people can hopefully do that too if they've been touched by your sharings today. And yeah, just want to say thank you so much for showing up, not only on this show, but in what you do for everyone you touch, and being that transmission of what's possible when you follow your calling and what you love. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you deeply. Your questions have really made me think. It's been a very moving conversation. Thank you.
And so for today, thank you for joining us at Redefining Success. And until next time, bye-bye.